This webinar is hosted by Commentelli, which provides competitive and market intelligence solutions to the customers worldwide to help them turn data into insights so they can make better business decisions.
My name is Untitled Chapter. I'm the founder of Eye on Eye, innovation scouting consultancy, where the I stands for insights. We're going to talk this afternoon about the insights that you need, the processes that you need to have within your company, basically to build your insight, to build your insights into innovation. And you can use those innovations at the end of the day to make investments in your growth areas. Prior to working in my own company, I worked for DSM at the Innovation Center, and there I was responsible for identifying growth areas, new growth areas for the company. So that experience I'm using right now to basically build my own company, advising startups, corporates, and investors in their go-to-market strategies, basically.
Kari Surya. My role is head of growth at Commentelli, and basically it means that I try to help Commentelli and Commentelli's customers to grow. And what would be a better topic than today's presenter Ubald, who is with us trying to help to find ways to identify and capture the innovation and disruptions before they happen, emerging signals of the marketplace to enable that growth. So that's what we are doing at Commentelli. We are growing in US and Europe, as well as in certain countries in Asia. And likewise, we like to help our customers to grow. So moving forward with this growth journey, I think without further ado, we should jump to our first slide. And as you see, we are speaking here about value drivers. And this is kind of an executive summary of today's presentation. And there might be something that strikes one when in the second chapter you can see that the tools are exactly the same. So Ubald, why don't we invite you to open up these two concepts? What do you mean with these two key takeaways?
Well, I think for everybody working within a company, everybody knows that on one hand, it's about what's the money that you're making today. But everybody knows that tomorrow will look different than today. So if you don't think about the future, if you don't think about what would be next, if you don't think about what would be your next product or your next customer, basically, you miss out on opportunities, and you're only focusing on the things that are on your plate. So you have to think beyond what you're doing today. I think that's the key thing with innovation. That's also the key thing for the future of your company. And to some extent, and that was the second bullet point on this slide, the tools that you can use to look into the future are more or less the same type of tools as you're using today, assuming that you're using tools today to monitor basically what's going on in the world around you. The only thing is you have to use those tools in a different way. And I think that will be part of the discussion today. So how do you make use of the same tools, but in a different way? And how do you refocus basically your attention to what is the real value for your company for the years to come, basically?
Indeed. And now jumping further, we have collected some mega trends here. We also discussed in our blog earlier that we published together with Ubald from B2B and B2C and B2C to context. And here we have a paradox, right? When something good is actually also something, if we shouldn't say bad, very much hurting the companies and individuals across the Europe at the moment, which is causing lots of gray hair to people. We spoke a little bit about green transition, as well as the shock that the war in Ukraine caused by Russia is making and seeing in our daily lives. This paradoxality coins two sides. Would you like to open up a little bit more about this, Ubald? What do you mean when you think about that these would be the ways to capture innovation? What has this to do anything with innovation?
Yeah, well, if you look at the two pictures on this slide, and the right hand says briefing energy price crisis. On the left hand side, you see the gas issues that Europe is facing or has been facing or still is facing, basically moving forward. And if you have to worry about the utilities that you're using within your company today, then you focus on the left hand side. So what is the price today? What will be the price tomorrow? Which contract am I going to close to? to be secure that I get my utilities for running my company basically. Whereas on the long run, people know that the energy system in Europe or the energy system in the world basically has to change, and that's where new forms of energy are playing a more and more important role. That's about solar in this example. It's about wind energy. If you're busy with closing today's contracts, you will not find the time to start looking at which alternatives can I implement. Because if you want to change your company from using gas, for example, to using solar-powered electricity for generating hydrogen, for example, it's not something you can change overnight. But you need to be prepared for that. You need to have it on your radar, basically. So looking on the left-hand side, today's energy prices will not give you the opportunity to start looking into creating more long-term perspective within the company, how to change, and also what opportunities there might be to build new businesses. And I think on the next slide, we have a similar example for a completely different business chain, basically.
Exactly. So actually, this kind of shocks in the energy price or inflation, as here is the consumer price index, we could see them as a gift because they force the companies to think differently and look for alternatives.
Yeah, but again, on the short term, people are raising their prices on one hand. They might see their revenues going down or might see buying power decreasing. It doesn't mean that people will start changing to new categories of products, for example. But if you're in the retail business at the same time, you're confronted with all these digital tools that are being developed, which you can use within your store or which you can use in your sales channels, basically. And again, the same with the energy. It requires a different type of interest, a different type of activity within your company. It requires that you reserve time to first identifying the fact that these type of trends might be relevant for your future businesses. And then it also needs time, of course, to implement these trends or to benefit from those trends or to start making business by developing those trends, developing those type of solutions for the marketplace. And I think that's the cornerstone for innovation. It starts with reserving time, basically, especially if you start talking about long-term trends.
And that's the kind of thing that if you have the house on fire, it's a little bit too late to look for the fire extinguisher and try to find the water, right? So if people are struggling, and many companies in Nordics in retail business have gone bankrupt now recently, just the last 6 months. So then it's a little bit last moment to come to say to your CEO that, hey, let's try this virtual reality thing. Can I get extra budget for that? When actually they have to close the shop floor totally and close the lights of the boutique. So how do the people get that time to prepare and increase the preparedness if they are so focused on their daily doings?
Yeah, well, if you close to bankruptcy, it might be too late, basically, to change, and maybe then you are definitely too late to change, which means that you didn't start on time, basically, to start looking at how you could keep pace with what's going on in the world and where you would see new growth opportunities. Because if you go bankrupt, for example, because a e-commerce channel is now the leading retailer in your country, then you were too long busy with your old way of doing businesses, so that you didn't jump on the bandwagon of innovation and didn't jump on the new opportunities that are offered, basically. And the same holds for a discussion going on in the Netherlands right now about the fact that people that have solar panels installed on their roofs, they benefit from lower energy cost, and the people that, for whatever reason, were not capable of installing those panels are now suffering higher energy prices, are suffering more from the high energy prices than the people that early on jumped on the bandwagon of innovation opportunities from a consumer perspective, but it comes from a business perspective. If you're too late, then you might be out of business. So
at that moment when everybody wants to install solar panels, that's when the solar panels price also will go through the roof, of course, and all the implementing companies are busy serving customers. So it's kind of worst possible time to start to change the business when the crisis is already on.
Yeah, definitely. You have to start on time. I think that's and well, that's an open door a little bit. That's too easy an answer, of course. But because what is on time? And to do that, to start on time, you have to keep your eyes open to see what's going on in the world. You need to have insights in order to identify those signals of change and to respond to those signals of change. And I think that's where every company, every CEO has a responsibility basically to say, okay, we reserve time on our agenda to discuss about the long-term future.
And that's not a really good opening for the next slide, actually, because we have discussed this also with our other ambassadors in this ambassador series, that you need to look for many different places, not to the usual suspects only. And as we see here, different items. If you think about your past history, which ones used to be the usual suspects for you to look for the new signals? Because you see here 4 domains are key, but maybe it depends company or industry to industry what they usually focus on.
Yeah,
Meaning that, you know, one company has a blind spot in the IP rights, whereas the other one has it in the NGO movement, for example, that they are overlooking maybe some areas because they are the prisoners of their own industry mindset.
Yeah, that's true. I worked for DSM before, as I said, and DSM still is basically a very science and technology heavy company. So it's no surprise that from an R&D community within such a company, a lot of ideas are being generated basically of how they could improve their products, how they could build, how they could move into new areas, for example. From a business perspective, where I worked in the innovation center, I always said, look at the financial block of this, and look where venture money is being invested, because that's where people have an idea about new products and services that can be brought to the market, and they are typically a little bit more advanced or more business oriented or more entrepreneurial than pure science and technology type of people. So you might be confronted with things that are in a TRL level 6, 7, whereas science and technologies might be in technology readiness levels of 2 or 3 or 4, for example. So that's from that where is the money being invested and where do people see opportunities. At the same time, if you talk about politics and regulatory bodies, there's so much subsidies and funding coming from governments across the world that also gives a signal where future business could be or can be developed basically. And last but not least, or maybe we should start with that. At the end of the day, there's a society that feels that is confronted with certain issues where they want solutions for. And that's so listening very well to the market, look where the money is invested, look what guidance politics is giving basically where you could build your new businesses. That's where a lot of those ideas start within the company. And here in this slide, I try to make that a little bit tangible. If you look indeed for the financial part, you see that a lot of money is being invested in global venture deals. The number in itself doesn't mean anything, by the way. You have to really start digging into the details of those numbers to identify which areas are of interest. But if you take, for example, the climate neutral plan of the European Union, going climate neutral by 2050, it goes without saying that there's an awful lot of innovation needed to make that happen, because some solutions aren't there yet to make it happen.
One really interesting comment where I would like to have your opinion that we have heard elsewhere is the rise of metaverse, just in this context. So if we think about science and technology, all this talk about Web 3.0 and the future where Facebook is relaunching their name as Meta, and the companies are doing digital twinning and so on, the Accenture and Nokia and so on. So the kind of technology is there to virtual reality worlds. That has existed quite some time in different formats, sometimes more mature, sometimes less. The most evident is young people playing online games in these virtual realities. And then financial is following that. So when Microsoft, Accenture, Facebook, and others are betting money on this metaverse, well, obviously there is lots of venture capital money and the big company money as well. In the politics and regulatory bodies, it's not quite clear, but the European Union actually had a session in metaverse. And in LinkedIn, there went the joke around that there was only some 17 people or so who signed up. So they put lots of money to make a presentation in metaverse, but if only 17 people showed up, was it really very well spent money from the taxpayers' point of view? So there we come to the last box, the society, people, and NGOs. What does it matter with the technology, money, and politics or politicians if the people are not along with you? So in context of metaverse, where you see people actually are not oftentimes the mega brands launching themselves. It's more that where are the humans, like the children, for example, in those computer games. So what is your take on that? I mean, is metaverse a flop because it didn't get the European Union more than 17 people to their metaverse show? Or how do you see that topic as a one example? There might be other B2B examples as well, but if we use that as a concrete example, how do you see that? Because it has the money, it has the technology, and it had the politicians interested.
Yeah, I think I recently saw some numbers on the whole metaverse thing. Maybe it's a very good illustration if only 70 people show up for a session with the European Union on that specific topic, that people have really that it's not tangible yet for people. So people can't break it down into something where they say, here I can build a business. And there are quite a lot of startups in that space that all advertise with metaverse. And I'm guiding, I'm coaching a group of startups right now. And everybody in the third sentence, they come up with AI, for example. And they say, well, AI is a buzzword, like the metaverse is a buzzword, like blockchain for some people is a buzzword. And if you cannot provide the right context, people don't see it, that it becomes alive. And then, okay, well, it's a nice verse, but we have no idea where it's going to. And of course, there are billions of dollars basically invested right now in these type of developments, and some will emerge at a certain moment in time. But it tells you also that dive deeper into those topics to really understand what it is about and how you can benefit from that. Because it goes without saying that if you talk about the whole digital trend, for example, there's an enormous potential out there for companies to start developing new services, to start developing new business models. But yeah, then you're again on that same abstract level of digital is important. Yeah, everybody knows that digital is important. And I think that's where the challenge is for a lot of people. How do you make it tangible within your company?
And that leads us to the next slide. You have here a concrete example.
Yeah, well, this is basically, so on the previous slide, we were talking about the long-term future, basically, but at the same time, also in existing value chains, there are enormous dynamics going on, and this is the semiconductor value chain. And everybody knows there's enormous debate going on where the US and Europe says, okay, we want to strengthen basically our industry by building semiconductor plants both in the US as well as in Europe. At the same time, US government is saying that Dutch ASML, the leading machine manufacturer in the world for chip making machines, basically is not allowed to sell its latest model to China, and they might even not be allowed to sell their generation before that to China anymore if the US was to decide upon that. So there's an enormous geopolitical battle going on in that industry that is impacting your day-to-day operations again. And so it's not only that innovation is sometimes challenging, and also basically running your day-to-day business comes with a lot of challenges that you have to face and where you have to respond upon. So again, that's coming back to one of the first slides where we talk about today's business on the gas prices, for example, which you could say is a hopefully relatively short issue that we're faced with right now. Whereas this issue, for example, is again a much more complex issue where a lot of people are very, very, very busy with. Because if you're more down the value chain on the consumer electronics side, for example, you have to make sure that you get your chips to build your phones, or to build your cars, or to build your heat pumps, or to whatever chips are being used for these days. So that's messing up the value chain quite a bit right now. All the challenges in this specific value chain, and again, it sometimes distracts people from innovating, whereas a company like ASML keeps on innovating, basically, to make sure that they are already developing the next generation, whereas still 80% or 90% of the world is using their older generations type of machines. So it needs continuous attention. It needs continuous investments, despite all the efforts, all the issues that you have in your value chain.
And maybe preparation for the alternative futures, because if suddenly there comes the logistic crisis or something that is causing too much demand, as I remember in this space, the esports, the young people playing all these computer games and so increased the need of the chips, and as a consequence, the industry had to fight against the gamers who gets most of these chips, because they can be used for many purposes. And that kind of creates a supply shock. But the supply shock can also be because of the logistics, because of the war, because the lack of copper or some raw materials that have gone sky high in prices as well. So how can people prepare for these alternative futures when they are very complex and interdependent, these just-in-time deliveries in the past globalized world?
Yeah, well, we said it before. It starts with basically reserving time. You have to make it a fixed element or your agenda in a company, basically, where you say, okay, this is what we want to do. If you're not willing to reserve the time, then at a certain moment in time, you will be confronted with the fact that your technology is outdated, that your services are outdated, and that others are taking over. And so I think that's where it all starts with.
I'm also thinking economies of scale, buying everything from one vendor versus diversifying the risk geographically or technology-wise or so on. That these are the decisions the companies need to think.
Yeah. That's what you see happening now as well. Indeed, that people are starting to think: can we redefine our value? Can we redefine? Can we start looking for new suppliers, or can we build local stocks? So that's where creativity starts. At a certain moment, people are confronted with an issue, and then they say, okay, well, we have to solve that differently. In the automotive industry, for example, the just-in-time delivery is very nice until something happens, and then suddenly the whole system blocks.
Well, speak about that. Here in Sweden, you might need to wait 1 year for your new car to arrive once you have purchased that. And actually, to the audience, you are very welcome to debate these questions by posing questions, and also after this session, we have Q&A discussion, so welcome to join that. But moving forward, maybe to this next. So here is maybe a little bit more concrete things. That reserving time was something that you just mentioned. But here, if we start with the time box, you lift up there the process and touch points. What do you mean with touch points?
Yeah, maybe. So there are three elements which we'll discuss further on. It's time, it's the lenses, and it's the resources. And I think on the next slide, we tell a little bit more about the process. Process is first, you have to think about what is it that you want to do, and how do you want to organize it. What to do and how to organize it. So what to do is that comes with those touch points. How do you interact about the topics if you start talking about the next innovation wave? Who needs to be triggered within your organization to start thinking about it, to start discussing about it, to start engaging about it, to start raising it to the level where you can take a decision within an organization to say, let's start investing in it. And as I said, in DSM, I was responsible for identifying new growth areas, and that all had to do with creating that touch point where you could light the fire basically in an organization to say, yeah, let's start investing in this because this looks so promising for our organization. We need to start moving forward. We need to really start working on this. And it can be all over the place. I was lucky working in Innovation Center where we're looking at more radical type of innovations, but it could also be much less radical. But there is a certain trend going on or a certain thing going on. We need to act upon that. We need to start adding a new product category, for example, towards what we're doing. And those touch points are critical because that's where you have the discussion with people in your organization, and there are different means of doing that. And I think on the next one I highlight a few of those touch points basically.
So here actually it's you said all around, so multidisciplinary from different units and very much people related. So touch point means, if I translate you correctly now, to build internal alliances. Build your internal network inside the company to get the buy-in for decisions and far in advance, really early in the process to warm up the people to see that something is emerging.
Yeah. That's
and this then relates to exploration framework. Would you like to open up that exploration framework a little bit? What do you mean with that?
What I mean with the exploration framework is that's what I said in the earlier slides already. There's so much going on out there, and the key question always is, what do you want to focus on? How do you get a little bit more focus in this? How do you make it a little bit more tangible, basically, in your organization to start working towards something where you can start creating. Where you can start a workshop around, for example, because it's nice to give the metaverse as an example. If you would organize a workshop within a company around the metaverse, and you would invite 20 people into a metaverse workshop, and people cannot relate to that topic, then the workshop will not be really successful. If you're gonna have a workshop around clean technology, and you end up, let's go into solar or let's go into wind, and then it's the abstract level is too high then to really have a meaningful discussion about these type of topics. And the idea of the exploration framework is that you start translating basically the more global trends into something that's manageable within a company and that people can start relating with. And I think that is what the exploration framework concept is about. And it helps if the company already has a future vision. If the company doesn't have a future vision, the outcome of such an exercise might be, okay, now we have a future vision for our company.
Exactly. So knowing where to go to, and then starting to look where to explore, involve the people across the organization, building those alliances. And I'm sure we come later to those practical tools and sources. But if this is the high-level view of this slide, maybe next slide will go a little bit more in depth. What you like to say? What do you mean with all these different screenshots here?
Yeah, so it starts with, as I said, by you have to reserve time. That's investing in a process, and time means that somebody in the organization has to say, okay, you're allowed to spend a certain amount of time and money on basically what you want to do. That could be one person or two persons or whatsoever. But that's something you have to get the responsibility basically to do something. And as I said, create an exploration framework. You're looking basically as a company for the needle in the haystack to invest to start your innovation and to trigger that curiosity in an organization. In the middle section of this slide, basically, what you can start doing is by start sending out a trend newsletter on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis or monthly basis. Don't do it every day. Every day, people would like to know what the gas prices are doing or what your customers are doing. But if you talk about trends, you have to decouple that basically from the day-to-day news that people get flooded with, basically. You have to find the time to send something out that's really specific. And for example, a trend newsletter is a good way of doing that. the one in the middle is basically a trend report where you do a little bit more in-depth analysis every quarter or half a year or every year, for example, where you shape the environment a little bit better, where you make somewhat more deep dives into that. And if you want to make it even more engaging, you can start organizing a webinar, and then hopefully more people show up than the metaverse webinar that you mentioned of the European Union, basically. And then you get discussion in you. Hopefully you should get discussion within your organization. And then if you want to translate that to touch points where you can start thinking about what to do, you can start organizing an ideation, for example. And an ideation derived from such a trend exercise should be a theme-based ideation where you say, okay, we want to have an ideation about this specific topic where we think that the future of the company lies, or that could impact in the future. What are the ideas that there are in an organization? Or, and that's the bottom, the right bottom, the one on the right, lower right, basically. And you can start organizing design workshops with a group of people where you start brainstorming what a specific theme could mean for a company and how that could be translated into future business opportunities for a company. But then you're already into a situation where you get, where you have created a certain awareness within the company that people are willing to either send in their ideas around a specific theme or start participating in a workshop to further basically create future business opportunities for a company.
There's also this really interesting thing in the top of the list, target at triggering curiosity. I think this must relate to the building those touch points and your internal alliances far in advance. Can you give some examples how you in the past have managed to trigger curiosity in a target way inside the organization? Because I think many people would like to change their companies for the good, but they might have hard to get the stakeholders on board. So definitely that triggering is important. What is a good way to make that work?
Well, I say all the elements on this slide are good ways of doing that. That's the easy way out here, Kari. But it's, you want to get that engagement, and that's why a newsletter and a discussion server and a webinar, for example, are ways to get that discussion and show people examples, make it alive, and don't hide it in between the 5 news items around what the existing market is being, what's going on in the existing market, because people will then not see it, and people will read over it. They will say, okay, these are the things that I'm dealing with today. This is what I focus on. So forget about the rest. I'm not interested in the rest. Sometimes there's nothing wrong, by the way, saying I'm not interested in the rest, because then apparently that specific person is not your core target audience for these type of exercises. So it's also about identifying the right people within the organization that can dream with you basically about what that future could be.
Actually, that's quite valuable. Not just to find the people who should know about it, who you should get on board, but also try to understand who are naturally inclined and interested about these topics and who are not, and who to maybe just leave aside because it's just waste of time. So find your fan base internally. I think that was really good kind of internal qualification. Find your tribe inside, find your change makers. And we can come back to this slide later, and dear audience, feel free to continue asking questions. I see in chat there's some questions. Let's take them in the end. So anything pops up in your mind, ask us in the end or write in the chat. But if we jump further to the next slide, we can see here also a little bit that the tangibility topic, that how do you make it concrete?
Yeah, basically what you see here, and I will illustrate, I will tell you what you see here. Basically on the left-hand side, you see that future vision of your company, assuming you have one. If you don't have one, then you should start thinking about it. You should start asking about it. What is the future vision of your company? And on the right-hand side, basically, you see a group of people, and that's about who are your ambassadors, your stakeholders, your enthusiasts, the people that you interact with. Basically, what is the team within your organization of people that want to think about that future vision of the company, that want to be engaged and have the creativity basically to start translating what you could say, those trends into themes and topics of a company. And if you click, Kari, then you see how it is basically being built up, because it all starts looking into what I discussed already before. You have these high-level technology trends and societal trends, basically. And so here you see the buzzwords: digital and AI, clean tech, urbanization, connected world. And if you do an internet search on the top tech trends for 2023, you will easily get a list of 20 where you can start working with if you want. But that's what I said. You have to make it tangible at the end of the day. So if you start from here and then start detailing it a little bit, and depends, of course, on which type of company you are. And if you take here, I took here transportation as an example, then innovation themes that are linked to all the topics that you see below basically are, for example, distributed ownership. You talk about cars, you talk about driverless cars. Talking about trends, by the way, the driverless cars trend seems to be over its hype curve, and everybody is now struggling to make the concept really work. But it's still a topic on the agenda of many. Electrification, you could say that's already is fast growing, and maybe in some countries it's already maturing. In Norway, for example, I think 80% of the new cars are full electrical vehicles these days.
Yeah, and in Nordics that's growing very much. There's been government subsidies, and the gasoline price now, of course, the electricity price is a little bit up, but also this distributed ownership, car pools and that kind of things. It's gaining ground.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean that it's mature already. It's still growing very fast, and there's still a lot of issues to be solved. So basically, so then if you go one level deeper again, basically, you might end up for topics for your company where you say, okay, well, we have a keen interest in software for those autonomous vehicles, for example, or software for electrical vehicles, because there's more and more software going into those cars. Sensors for autonomous vehicles, for example, or there are more and more sensors going into any car these days. But also on the electrification side, smart recharging solutions. And now suddenly you start getting closer and closer, basically, what a business could look like. And now you can start discussing, are these real opportunities for my company? What is happening? What's going on in this field of software for autonomous vehicles, for example, which is all linked to those high-level technical and societal trends, basically. And that's what I call an exploration framework. And to some extent, there's a continuous interaction going on between all the three levels that you see here, because the exploration framework might be the right one or not. And then you go back to your innovation themes and start discussing over and over again. What can I do? What can I extract basically from the innovation teams into my exploration framework? And all those exploration frameworks, you can start searching really targeted, basically, what's going on in the world. Where do I see opportunities? Where can I collaborate? Where can I innovate, basically? So they're becoming really tangible.
This is quite beautiful in a sense that anyone can read the magazines or Google some mega trend or something. For example, the AI and connected world. That's no rocket science. It still leaves plenty of questions to their minds. How do I make it tangible? How does this show in my life? How could this help my company? Where would be the future direction of my company? What would be my big next step? And would there be enough demand for that next step that it's not just innovation for the sake of innovation? And then you can just put it in a funnel in a way that, yes, actually there seems to be companies and business concepts popping around, distributed ownership, for instance, or the driverless cars. How do these link together? And then you are in the software of autonomous vehicles and the sensors and all this. You can build alliances then based on this with fintech or other kind of technology companies that might not be on your traditional radar of your traditional competitors or customers, sort of thinking strategically from completely different perspective.
Yeah.
That's how I see this. It makes it very clear. Open site.
Yeah, and I put the exploration framework, but you could also put there what's in it for me. And if you can't answer that question, what's in it for me, then sometimes there is nothing in it for you. But sometimes you have not made it, you cannot grasp it yet. And I think that's what you want to achieve by doing it the way it's being depicted here.
Great. So, dear audience, we like to discuss this with you in the end. Let's go forward. What do we have here in the next slide is about practical things. So, as promised earlier, let's discuss a little bit about the sources and tools. One thing you mentioned earlier, that the companies do not necessarily need so much new things. They can quite much do everything with the existing setup as long as they change their way of thinking, their lenses, so to say. What do you think? What is possible to do for companies with very small investment, apart from allocating time in the calendar, like you mentioned?
Well, it starts with allocating time. That's one thing. Otherwise, it will never work. But what I highlighted here on the left side of the slide, basically, if you start looking outside, what's available there, building on the previous two slides, things like battery news is out there. Fuel cells news is out there. So if you want to follow basically what's going on in this case, energy storage type of developments, it's not that difficult to find those sources and to tap into what's being discussed there. If you are a farmer or if in the agricultural industry and doing standard solutions, you might simply have to switch to vertical farmer daily, and you know what's going on in the vertical farming business, for example, which could also be interesting for retail, by the way. So you will hardly ever be the first one that start looking into something, which means that there are already dedicated resources outside, which you can easily bring into your company and share and start distributing basically the insights of those sources towards your target audience. And that's where the translation comes from all these newsletters outside, for example, to a dedicated newsletter or a dedicated trend report, and that you want to bring out with a certain frequency to trigger that discussion, because not everybody typically nobody within an organization is interested in getting 25 additional newsletters in their mailbox on a regular basis. They want to have focus in basically what's being delivered to them, and that's where tools like Commentelli, for example, can play a role in bundling that information and sending it out basically to your target audience. And that's where those touch points come into play. And last but not least, at the end of the day, it's about people that you can find within your company to share those insights, to discuss those insights, to translate that into inspirational stories, and to start converting the thinking in a company, and to start fueling the innovation, basically.
And this could also be seen vice versa in the process, like we discussed a bit earlier here, that first build those alliances, the touch points in the organization, multidisciplinary to different departments, then workshop with them, try to find the ideas from the mega trend towards the practicality, like you say, what's in it for me? What are the new partnerships? What are the new practical applications? Is it the software? Is it some new product set? What is it actually that your company needs to do to embrace the future in concrete terms? And once you identify those areas outside of your current setup, then start to gather information, different insights from outside marketplaces and information sources, without killing people with overflow. Like you said, no one wants to have 25th newsletter. They already have 24 and they cannot even read those 24. So there comes Commentelli into equation to filter out that, if I understood you correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And indeed, you're right. At the end of the day, the time is the crucial element in this, and the time and the people are the crucial elements in that. Where you start creating that discussion. Okay, what could be topic of interest? And it's a story in which you diverge, converge. You start discovering what is of interest for, and that's why there's an element, I think, which wasn't mentioned so far on any of the slides. Continuity is very important. It's not something that you build up overnight. It's not a one-time exercise that you do in January and forget about for the rest of the year. you need to keep on fueling the organization, basically what's going on. You have to make the organization ready basically to start investing in it. That's not a one-time exercise. It's something you have to do continuously, basically.
So you need to identify those people, stay relevant in their minds, engage with them, get their inputs. The people are kind of diamonds, and you don't want to waste your diamonds or trash your diamonds. So actually, that's why it's so critical to influence them in a right way, inform them in a right way without causing them the information overdose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very well. Thank you, Balt. Here is one of the last slides, that practical action. How do we actually want to help our dear audience? And Commentelli, as mentioned, is one of those platforms that can filter, and your company is the Eye on Eye. Would you like to open again? What did the Eye on Eye mean?
The I stands for insights, innovation, and investments. And I think basically that's what we discussed. It starts with insights. Where do you want to innovate at the end of the day? And where do you want to put your money at the end of the day? And building these type of processes, implementing these type of processes within an organization. I think that's crucial for the future success of an organization. And combined, I think, with what Commentelli can deliver, you make it smooth for an organization to run these operations and create at least a number of touch points in a very light way, in a very easy way at a certain moment in time.
Excellent. And Malika, we have some questions. Would you like to invite the audience to discussion?
Yeah, so we have a question from Pam Royce. How far in advance to set up or begin to get relevant data insights?
Depends on the industry that you're in. If the innovation cycle is relatively short, then what you see today can be translated into new product ideas the next quarter, for example, and be introduced by the end of the year, or even faster if you would like to do it. If you are in a deep tech industry, for example, the clean tech initiatives by the European Union, for example, we looked into I took a deep dive into hydrogen 3 years ago, basically, and that was just at the tipping point where people started to become interested in hydrogen, basically. If we see what's going on right now, there's so much more going on. So yeah, you always can be too early, but more people are often too late, so they miss the boat. So. And that's where I said that's where the continuity comes into play, and that's where an organization needs to have those discussions on a regular basis about what their future vision is, what changes they see going on in the industry, basically. And you don't have to. You can start small if you want, but you need to get your place, to get your seat at the table to have that discussion, and that's where all management has that responsibility to step into that.
There was some other question.
So it's industry dependent.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's another one. I think this one was based on one of the slides. It says, example of titles who champion buy-in. What titles potentially less enthusiastic?
Yeah, are there some profiles, some people in company who usually are not into these things? Are there some usual suspects who easily get involved in these kind of things based on your experience?
Well, the usual suspects are often the people we're working with in the R&D group. With the risk that they start dominating these type of discussions because they start focusing too much on science and technology in those discussions. I think the challenge is to find indeed those intrinsically curious people within on the business side that have their ideas, that are entrepreneurial, that want to step outside of their comfort zone. So those are the people that you want to bring into those discussions as well. At the same time, they can be so disconnected to technology that they come up with the most unrealistic ideas. But sometimes it helps to create a spark of ideas in the total group creates the new innovation, for example, for a company. So it's important that it's multidisciplinary. Not only R&D people, definitely also business people that have an entrepreneurial mindset and can think about new ways of doing businesses.
Right. We don't have any more questions. Thank you so much, Kari and Abal, for this insightful presentation. Enthusiast. Further question, please feel free to contact the email address here on the screen. Many thanks and hope to see you all again soon.